Hi, I'm Reggie Young. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com. We're coming to you today on location from Hollywood, California. Hollywood, with our good friend Reggie Young. What's happening, Reggie?
What's happening, man? How are you?
I am great.
It's great to meet you.
Great to meet you too, because I've followed you. I know who you are. I've seen you live. I've seen you on YouTube, and now here we are. I could touch you. I could be right next to you, and here we are.
Bass Player Love.
At Bass Player Love. You got it. Let's talk about you. And your career. You're from New York.
Yep.
You play the bass.
Yes,
You've
sir.
done all kinds of stuff. You have lots of recordings. You have a brand new recording. Let's start from the beginning. How'd you become a bass player?
Man, my brother told me I was going to be a bass player. I wanted to be a drummer, but my older brother, was a drummer. And I think he was jealous. He said, "You're going to be a bass player." So he told my whole family, my mom, he's going to be a bass player. I became a bass player.
You were about how old at the time?
8.
Okay.
Yeah, because by the time I was 12, I was already playing the bass. And then in middle school, I started playing in the stage band.
Yeah.
Faking reading music,
Yeah.
because I already could play by ear. A lot of us fall into that. I won't say mistake, but we do that first.
Just hit the root on one.
Yeah. And you're good. But I'm playing all these riffs to like Hawaii 5-0, all that stuff stage band schools do.
Yeah.
And not reading. And the conductor's like, yes. Meanwhile, he knows I'm not reading a lick, but he's just enjoying the fact that I just knew the tunes. So I was playing all through school. And then in high school, I switched to upright.
I was about to ask you that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Playing in the orchestra. And then I quickly...
So with the bow and all that, did you go
Yeah.
Samandal
Just
method?
all notes. Like this is the string. Here's the bow.
Is it a French bow or German bow?
Frenchman. That's both German and French.
Okay.
It means I don't know.
Okay. Gotcha. The bow. Who cares? It's a bow.
It was the high school bow, Uniondale High School. It was written on the bow, carved actually, so no one could take it home.
That's funny.
Yeah. So I did that for a while, and then got into a lot of gospel.
Yes.
And start, of course, on electric bass. I never kind of broke into the jazz scene on upright. Really couldn't afford an upright. Didn't like the idea of lugging around an upright. So the electric bass seemed, easier access to gigs and more accessible. And I took off from there.
Well, tell me about some of those gigs. What did you start doing? How did your career initially get rolling?
With a pastor named Timothy Wright. He was out of Brooklyn. That was my first professional gig, and he hired me to play with him in his choir. And I started playing on a lot of his records, and he ended up taking me around the world. I did a session in London with him, with the London Fellowship Mass Choir, Louisiana, and with the Ruby Terry and Lake Charles Mass Choir. I did recordings with him all over.
Church music, gospel choir. Oh,
yeah.
that must have been exquisite.
Yes, it was, and he was a funky man. So he wrote some really good tunes. I believe he was the Godfather. Was his title of gospel, I
Okay.
believe. And from there, I went to Hezekiah Walker and Donnie McClurkin. Worked with Karen Clark. Just a whole bunch.
All right.
but-
Do you happen to be friendly with a fellow named Andrew Goucher?
I love Andrew Boucher. I said last night in my show, while I was on the East Coast holding down all the gospel artists, he was here on the West Coast, just, man, tearing up everybody's records out here, even with like Andre Crouch and
Yep.
L.A. Mass, and even with the Hawkins, working with them. And I followed Andrew for a while.
Yeah. I've interviewed him, I think, about 3 times, and he always says, I grew up in the church.
Yeah. I adapted my church. In the black church, they have that shout music where the tempo is like here, and they're like dancing. Doom, 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 doom. He's the master of that on that bass, man. And I used to study a lot of his approach to that, and I picked up a lot of stuff from him.
Good guy. Let's talk about your new record. It is called
Young Street.
Young Street.
Reggie Young Street. It's based on the diversity in New York.
Not to be confused with Toronto, because they have a Young Street, but it's spelled different.
You know what? I looked up the word Young Street to see if I could find a street sign to use as my album cover.
Yeah.
And I saw there's a Young Street in Canada.
Yes.
I'm like, of all the places in New York you think I could find Young Street, I think I found one.
That's
It was
Yonge.
yeah,
Yeah.
I saw that on Google. There's one in New York. I think it was way up almost near Canada. So
That's way up.
yeah, so
Well, tell us about the record.
it's like again, it's a mixture of basically the common denominator is funk, kind of like that East Coast New York kind of funk. All the bass players I was influenced by as well, but it carries a wide diversity of genres, but without sounding like the record's all over the place. You know, sometimes people will put out a record and it's kind of like, I don't know what this record is, man.
Yeah.
When you know, so
It's cohesive and it flows and it makes
has
sense.
flow, yeah. And I tried to just kind of listen to my history and the streets of New York and the rich music that comes out of New York, you know, which there is a vibe and a style to it. I can't really put my finger on it, but I realized it's being that that's really where I'm from and what I grew up in. Just be yourself, go in the studio and write some music. Hopefully that sound will come out. And from the looks of it, it's worked.
You know, it's interesting. When I was first studying music in college, and I'd hear on TV, I could hear the commercials, and you can tell if they were recorded in New York or if they were recorded in LA.
Yeah,
It's
that's
really,
true.
each one's got its own vibe. You mentioned that you were influenced by some bass players, and I did not ask you that. So who were some of those bass players that were you? Did you have any bass heroes when you were first coming up?
Yes, my bass heroes are Jeffrey White, Abraham Laboriel, Andrew Goucher, Marcus Miller, John Patitucci, Jimmy Haslip, a little bit of Jocko. I didn't really get introduced to Jocko until later, and then it was kind of like the same song over and over. I kept hearing people talk about Jocko. You gotta hear the chicken. You gotta hear the chicken. I'm like, okay. And then I had to kind of go out and listen to a lot of other stuff like with Weather Report, you know.
Yeah.
But Chicory for the fusion stuff, it was like a lot of Chicory and Electric Band. For actual like record material, when I considered maybe I'll be an artist one day like these guys, it was like Marcus Miller, because I really appreciated the musicality in his records, how his bass and his tone is just phenomenal. Man, I mean, from Luther Vandross records, David Sanborn's records, you just know.
Miles.
Yeah, you just know it's Marcus, right?
Yes.
And he makes the bass, his voice comes through his bass without being intrusive to the music. You just like, you know, you kind of say to yourself, man, who's that on bass? But it's just not, you're not saying that through the whole song. You're enjoying the whole tune, but you still say, man, who's that on bass? But it's not too much, you know. And then when
You only
started-
say that on the first tune that you hear. The second tune you hear, you say, that's Marcus on the bass.
Right, exactly. By the second tune, you know who that is on bass. And with Marcus, once you know it's Marcus, by the first 4 bars, you know it's. And then I got into other players like Anthony Jackson. I really love Anthony's approach, and he's so abstract. When I knew I was in love, I started on the 4-string, which was a bass my older brother gave to me. It was a Fender Mustang. My first bass was a Yamaha RBX 700.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's a nice first bass.
Yeah.
That's a nice anytime
Yeah.
bass, any number
A
bass.
little 4-string, and I went straight from there to an Olympic Persuader,
Okay.
5-string. One of my first successful gospel sessions that I did was Hezekiah Walker Live in Toronto. After the session was done, we were going to a rehearsal weeks later, and I'm in Brooklyn, bass on my back, get out the car, I'm walking, both of my feet end up in the air like this with the bass on my back. Had it not been for that bass, I don't know, I might have been unconscious or maybe worse.
Wow.
It broke my fall, but it broke.
Yeah.
My Olympic, I was like, my Stanley Clark bass. No, but it cracked at the head and it cracked at the by the body.
As long as you didn't crack.
No, I didn't crack, right.
Okay.
So,
Boy, Anthony Jackson. Last time I talked to Anthony was at the Fodera booth at a NAMM show.
Yeah.
And I know, he is. And I know you are a Fodera guy. And you have a beautiful bass, beautiful Fodera bass. Tell us a little bit about Fodera, why you like them so much.
well, Fodera came to me, I came to Fodera in 2000, maybe 4, and they built a bass for me, and I gave it back. I was playing Smiths. I had a Ken Smith bass for like 24 years, and I gave that bass back to them. I felt like it was too heavy. I wasn't comfortable with it. It wasn't. We met again at NAMM in 2010, and they were like, we want to try to do this again for you. I said, okay, let's give it a shot. So they wanted to make an attempt at now the Reggie Young signature bass. So we sat down for weeks and went over specs because they wanted to make sure it was comfortable for me. They didn't want to just put a Federa bass in my hands and say, here, just play it. They knew it. I've been playing one bass for over 20 years. How do you get somebody out of that instrument into one and be comfortable? They're geniuses. They did it. So some of the differences with my Federa that makes it so custom is the neck width. They went with the width I'm comfortable with. My pickup spacing that Federa normally use, they split the difference between what I'm used to and what they use. And my pickups are custom from Kent Armstrong, who actually designs the pickups in the Ken Smith basses. Although Ken Smith puts his name on his pickups, but they're designed by Ken Armstrong. So we gave Ken Armstrong a call, and he was more than happy. So he puts custom pickups into my bass. And those are some of the major differences. And people have been saying it sounds like a hybrid Federa. A guy came up to me yesterday and he was like, that's the best Federa I've ever heard in my life. I was like, wow. Yeah, a guy here said that. And I've heard that before.
It's beautiful, and what you do with it is beautiful too. I just interviewed Victor Wooten last week, and he had had like 4 or 5 Federa basses on there, longtime Federa guy. What about the future? I mean, now that the record is out, do you have a sense of, or do you have something that you say, I'm going to do this as soon as the record is out, or what's coming up? What about the future?
Well, I know I definitely need to get started on the next record. This record is actually doing well, although it's only been out for a few months. It's number 6 on the college jazz charts, and it's number 10 on the RMR charts for radio. So I'm very happy about that. I can't say I never expected to be, but I never expected to be. I'm learning the business side of music now. It's like you can't just put an album up on iTunes and just randomly walk up to people, hey, I have an album. Hey, I have an album out. They're like, okay, you got to put some effort in it. You have to work it. So that's what I'm doing with this record, and now it's gaining momentum. I just did Lords of the Low End for LaBella Strings.
Yeah.
And this Bass Player Live, just it's awesome to be able to do this and actually be the headliner for the evening last night, and now play with the All-Star players this evening. And I'm doing NAMM 18. I'll be doing Bass Bash for NAMM. And also NAMM is looking at getting me on one of the stages of theirs as well. So
we'll be there.
Yeah, and we'll be doing this again.
Yes, we will. We'll find you.
Yes.
All right.
It might not be a food truck, though. I like food.
Well, then I don't want to do it.
Yeah. Well, we're not doing it.
One more question for you, Reggie. What would you be if you weren't a bass player? I mean, you're living your life based on the decisions made by an 8-year-old, basically, right?
Yeah.
Or the decisions made for an 8-year-old.
It makes me feel like a kid when I play.
Well, something outside of music. What do you think you'd be if you weren't a bass player?
A lot of musicians might not say this, but I am a full-time musician. I work at the Apollo Theater. I've been there
that's right.
About 5 years now as the first jazz house in the house band.
Historic place.
Yeah, man, this is beautiful. I'm so happy to be there. And we next week start taping for the first season. Showtime is coming back with Steve Harvey. I got called to do that as well. So I'm really excited about that. And so, yeah, it's living that dream, right? So I also play at a church still. So I have some steady work while I'm working my record. But this is what I want to say a lot of musicians may not say, and I'll just say it to everybody that's watching and listening to this. I have a part-time job. Yes, that I go to 2 to 3 times a week. And I keep that job to help fund what I'm doing, because I'm an independent artist. I don't have a record label or anything like that. So I work, even those are jobs, the Apollo and the church that I play at as well. On the books, I'm part of the union, Local 802. It's important for us to have medical. It's important for us to think about our futures and our pensions. And again, I hold a part-time job. I work in the security business. You know, I'm a licensed private. I can work as my own private security company out of the state of New York. I'm certified and all of that. So I do that. I do private details along with other companies in New York, in the county of Nassau. And again, it's flexible because I do it part time and I've been doing it a while. So they understand that I do music. So
Well, it's
yeah,
interesting that
cool.
you have a part-time job in addition to your full-time job.
Yeah.
So you are one busy person.
Yeah.
Well, it's so great. Congratulations on the new record.
Thank you so much.
And
I enjoyed this.
and much luck, continued success to you, and we will meet again. We'll follow
sir.
up, and we
Yes,
know
sir.
we're going to see and hear lots more great things from you.
sir. Reggie Young,
With
Young Street.
with our new friend Reggie Young, on location, Hollywood, California. I'm John Liebman. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.